If it's already Zach v'Yosher, you go. If it's already Zach v'Yosher, you go. Now wait a second. Now wait. No, but I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, this way it's kind of easier to understand the dispute, because it's not a dispute about whether you can help yourself or not help yourself. The dispute is that Pinchas just saw it seichel and he didn't know what was going on, all these Kabbalah things. He just saw it seichel and ushdik. He didn't know that that there's some great spiritual tikkun taking place here. And so that's first of all. Second of all, in a certain way it's not so radical, because he at least finds some chet in Zimri. Third of all, I want to pull it back the other way. That in the Meir Shiloach we saw that it's possible to say that he's talking about a case where he just couldn't help himself. But so in a certain way that's not so radical. In a certain way that's not so radical. But in the Beis Yaakov it seems to me that it's not possible to say that, because he's saying he did the thing even though it wasn't Zach v'Yosher Negadeno. He did the thing even though he could see that it wasn't so pure. He did the thing even though he could see that it wasn't so pure. So he did the thing even though he could see that it wasn't so pure. So there was a certain chet to that. So that's totally mashma that he was judging whether he should do it, and he had a certain amount of free will, and he just from the fact that he had a very strong attraction beyond a certain point, he deemed that enough to decide that this thing was shaykh to him, that this thing was connected to him, and he could see that it wasn't Zach v'Yosher Negadeno, and therefore there's a chet in that. So in a certain way, the Beis Yaakov is more radical if you accept the assumption that we made at the beginning when reading the Meir Shiloach, that in the Meir Shiloach you could say that it ultimately was just an oinus, and the whole point is to say that the oinus is rooted in the divine will. But in the Beis Yaakov it's definitely not an oinus. In the Beis Yaakov it's about the fact that after experiencing a certain amount of taiva, Zimri decided that this is what should be done, because he believed that this came to him, and that means his nefesh is shaykh to him, and the fact that he's attracted to it is because of the taiv, and he doesn't even stress fighting the Yetzer Hara so much. In a certain way it's more radical. I find it pretty much impossible to interpret the way the Beis Yaakov says it in terms of oinus. I find it pretty much impossible. Yes.
Bringing the raya from David, that's what even though spiritually you see it, you still have to go back to here.
Yes.
Not do it.
No, not so frum. Even though spiritually you see it, you need to pull back from it. Kolzman, it's not Zach v'Yosher Negadeno. But there is such a thing that it will be Zach v'Yosher Negadeno. He's saying that basically that Zimri and Kolzman are supposed to get together, just not right now. Now maybe you could push it and make it very mild and take a lot of meaning out of it, to largely inflate it of meaning by saying that maybe they were supposed to do it in a different Gilgal when it was going to be bad. But he doesn't say that. He just says that. He doesn't say, so then you got to go back to Shulchan Aruch. No matter how much spiritual inclination you feel for this thing, you need to go back to Shulchan Aruch. He doesn't say that. He says, if the tzaddik feels an attraction to this thing, he might be totally correct that this thing is shaykh to him. And nevertheless, as long as it's not Zach v'Yosher Negadeno, he needs to look it over. He needs to inspect the business. He needs to try to introspect and see how is it in his own mind. Does he really feel that for some on top? How does it really feel? Does it really feel like it's pure and it's just clean, or is there, even though we know that the thing is mushrish in time, but is there some admixture of Ryan? As long as there's still some admixture, some impurity, then the tzaddik has to pull back. Not that you need to pull back the Shulchan Aruch all the time. There is such a thing as this antinomian thing of sometimes going and doing the will of God, because the tzaddik knows that a desire that comes to him is from God just because it comes to him. He has to pull back because it's not Zach v'Yosher Negadeno. You need to check it out. You need to check it out. No. As Zach v'Yosher darf das Team. Was? Ja, in Gename. Avada. Nein, in Gename. Sei geht gesund. What is the kind of bringing from David HaMelech? What was David HaMelech being proud of himself? It means that I didn't fool myself. That I didn't tell myself that a desire that I had was really pure when it wasn't, because I made cheshbonos for that tzaddik. Yes, he would have done it, even if it's kegen shulchan. I want to respond to what the Reb Johnny says. I think what you're saying is excellent, correct. That essentially theologically there's no machloikis, and that the Beis Yaakov the Messiah Yaakov is agreeing with his father, and there is such a thing as a taiva coming to a tzaddik, and because of that he's supposed to get up and do it. He's only fixing this Parshas shtikel because it's not so geschmack that Pinchos went and killed him. Yeah, as in the Torah shtayt, the Zimri is given a choyte, and so here we come to say that Zimri was just a total tzaddik. He's only fixing that shtikel. On the contrary, I'm saying in the depth of it, I think the Messiah Yaakov might be more openly radical because I think it's not shaykh to touch the Messiah Yaakov that it was an oinus. And the Meshaloich had shaykh to touch that it's an oinus because he said he doesn't say that. He says the chet was that it wasn't Sach. So it's mashma we're talking about a situation of free will where you can still check it out. He didn't check it out. If you check it out and you see that it's Sach Yosha, go ahead and do it. On the contrary, in the depth of it, I think the Messiah Yaakov is more radical. Is more clearly not talking about an oinus. The Messiah Yaakov is more clearly talking about a situation where the tzaddik still has a modicum of free will. You got to check to see if it's Sach Yosha. So you check and then you go and do. If you're totally overwhelmed by taiva and you can't really help yourself, there can't be any talk about checking. You're not in a condition to check the desire nor check it out. Yes.
The fundamental problem is that Kanayim Pergamba is an extraordinary measure, and it's completely opposite to having a bezdin. So all these things, is it what? That's for a bezdin. Like martial law, you declare martial law. Anyone outside, doesn't matter, you shoot him. That's why, and the question always is, why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron do it? Because they didn't have the useful... The kanois. But to start figuring out, that belongs in a court of law. And as a matter of fact, the real problem with David is not, the Gemara says that he didn't... So what was his sin? Nosen hat doch gesagt, his sin was that he didn't take Uriah to a bin Torah.
Okay, but that's all very nice. And I understand what you're saying. What you're saying has logical force to it. You could say that there could be an union of Kanoim Poignabay and Kanois that even if that person is really not responsible, but because he was an oinus and he had so much taiva and he's a tzaddik and God knows what. But the fact is, he did that thing, and in the eyes of the public, it's going to be a Chil Hashem. They can say Nasib Yisrael was Mizana, was Naram. So therefore, it's necessary in terms of public policy for someone to get up and do this. That's a very good logical point. That's a very good logical point, and I can believe it and buy it completely. That's not what the Ishbitzer is saying. That's all.
I agree. I'm saying that the whole discussion is out of place, because how can you have in an emergency situation? It's only before a court of law that you can argue this way and that way.
Look, the thing is that fakir. Basically, we're talking about spiritual insight here. He's saying we're talking about the mystical depth of the situation. The Meshaloich is saying that Pinchos didn't have enough spiritual insight to really understand what was going on. We're not talking about what goes on at best. Like you said, Kanai Poigaba is extra legal. So therefore, Kanai Poigaba is based on a real understanding of the situation. You come because you see this is an avla, this is really an avla. But Pinchos didn't understand that it's not really an avla.
The avla is to do an act like this in public.
Look, I hear what you're saying, but he understands. But I understand, but I don't know why it was done in public. But he understands Al Pikisvi Arizal that there was a great tikkun in it, and essentially it was taught. That's a given in this discussion. That's a given in this discussion.
That was the reason why Cosby did it. And she must have been, 100 Marilyn Monroes, and it was just impossible that even publicly he couldn't control himself. That was exactly her job, to get people like Zimri, who were Iskabed, because to take over a guy who was a naive, what's the big deal? But to take Zimri, that was her job.
Okay, listen.
She succeeded.
So you hold like the Messiah. You would like to be sakif that there was a gewisse chet.
No, but that's what the most of the Yoinoson were trying to do. Not sure. That's what she was.
Zimri was the carbon, and how was he the carbon?